Welcome to the Power of Persuasive Proposals. My name is Olesya Smatrova-Taylor, and I'm going to be your presenter today. And just a little bit of information about myself to give you a little bit of a background. If you haven't had a chance to meet me, I'm usually out and about speaking a lot in the community, educating people about proposals. It's my true passion. And I'm the president and CEO of OST Global Solutions, a Maryland consulting and training company, and we specialize in business development, capture, and proposals. So we help companies like yours win business. And I'm also practicing in capture and proposal manager. I still do proposals. Most of them are for us, but we also have select clients with whom I work. So I keep my skills fresh and able to bring you good content. My track record is pretty good. I've won more than $18 billion in new business, and still continuing to do this. I am also the president of the board of directors of the Association of Proposal Management Professionals, APMP, National Capital Area Chapter. So if you have not joined APMP, I highly recommend that you do. We have a great event coming up, which is a proposal boot camp that's coming up on the 17th of April. And if you haven't signed up yet, do. It's really an awesome resource, especially if you don't get to come to those events a lot and you're out of the area but can get to the DC area for one day. It would be a great event for you to attend. I am also an industry thought leader. Basically, I obsess about writing books, articles, and constantly educating people in this profession. I find a lot of satisfaction of helping people succeed and do really well, because this profession really is an engine that pulls the economy forward. Because we are helping people retain their jobs, we are making a difference, especially in the government contracting. The projects that we do are highly satisfying to plan so that they are executed correctly. I have 16 years of experience in proposal and capture management, marketing, and communications, and my background is at Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and the Financial Times of London. So let's talk about the proposal sins that are common and lead to losses. I want to start there because I want to kind of set the background for today's webinar that really focuses on persuasive proposals. What makes proposals good? Not just compliant, not just responsive to what the government wants, but what makes them absolutely sing. There are actually elements to that, and mastering them will get your win rate way up. Now, the failures that I'm going to list, they're common across the board in small companies and large alike. It's not like, large companies, of course, have professional shops. They hire people. They have a great hiring process to attract people who are really experienced, who are really good. However, having worked as a consultant in large companies, I see a lot of the times similarities that are much there are many more commonalities between the businesses than you would believe if you're a small business, for example, doing this. Now, the one biggest flaw that I see right away is really lack of substance. There's poor capture. Essentially, that's pre-proposal preparation. It doesn't matter. A lot of companies that even call it good capture and feel that they have good capture, in the end, when they get to the proposal, they wish they had done it over again because they really have not covered some of the most important things. Focus on the what and not the how in the write-up. It's easier to write on what you're going to do. How you're going to do something is harder because it takes you time to brainstorm on it, to figure it out. So a lot of the times our proposals are limited to, here are the steps we're going to implement, but you never ever, not you, but all of us are kind of guilty of that. Me on occasion as well when I run out of time. But really the focus is on what the solution is and not how you're going to go about it. Who is going to do the job? What is the approach exactly? What are the tools you're going to use? What is the schedule? What is the step sequence? And so on and so forth. There's also death by boilerplate. There's this whole movement of efficiency in proposals where people say, all right, it's got to be somehow easier. And I think that this is kind of what the government is really causing too, because the deadlines are shrinking and we have a situation that we're facing where we're saying, all right, how in the world are we going to produce, churn out those task order responses in 5 days, in 10 days, or there are people who are just generally don't want to spend on business development. They don't understand why proposals should cost money, and they insist, all right, we're just going to use boilerplate or cut and paste text. We're going to try to make it efficient. Well, you know what? A government evaluator that had asked about that said to me, I can see the boilerplate a mile away. A mile away. It literally is insulting. It reads like boilerplate. And if you guys don't believe me, test it. Can't you tell it's boilerplate when somebody hands you their writing assignment and you read it and you're like, all right, it doesn't really look like they have prepared it for this specifically. It just has a wrong smell. And sometimes it's such good boilerplate that you cannot even tell right away why, but it really reads that way. And trust me, there are people who will absolutely tell that you've done that way, and that really kills persuasion. Now, technical paper with no win themes or benefits or selling is another pitfall that a lot of proposals suffer from, and that is something that you will see with proposals that are written by a lot of engineers and technical personnel. They sometimes don't suffer from lack of substance. In fact, they may have a lot of substance in that, but they don't sell. There are no benefits. There is no actual, it's just a good and honest solution. Well, these can be effective, but they're not as effective as they should be. So they may actually cost you a win if you are not paying attention to how to be effective in proposals. There is poor writing, which is selling the wrong way. And this is the one that I'm going to really talk about. There's self-centered writing. People who believe that they're being good at selling, that they're in fact selling themselves really well, they're doing just the opposite. They're overselling and they're selling all the wrong things. They talk about themselves, how wonderful they are, what are all the benefits of their solution, of all the bells and whistles that the company brings. Not even a sight of customer in that whole discussion. A lot of people sell by turning on the internal commercial. They go into adjectives and adverbs and slather them on. We're going to talk about a lot of that later on in this presentation. And a lot of people coming from the academic writing, coming from the proposal writing that originates in the engineering and in the government industry, they use the wrong structure. They structure the text like they would structure an academic paper, and it does not sell that way. A lot of proposals have a poor or missing executive summary. It's shout out to executive summary writer out there. You probably have seen a lot of the atrocious ones out there, and you probably have had to rewrite a few. Now, few graphics. A lot of proposals really, so some people believe that when the customers tell you do not put excessive or unnecessary graphics, it means they don't want to see graphics. That is not true. You want to have graphics that are absolutely relevant to illustrating and communicating your approach better, and you have to have them in a proposal unless they explicitly prohibit the graphics. Most people will prefer proposals with graphics because they're boring, 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 horrible documents to get through and to read for the evaluators. And a lot of the evaluators, as you may find out, actually is not going to do a good job with, let me see here. I have information here that the audio has dropped out. Please let me know if you can hear me okay. Some people are not doing a good job with producing the graphics, and sorry, I lost my train of thought looking at the questions. The point that I wanted to make is a lot of the evaluators, they get drafted into evaluating the proposals, and they don't really want to be there. They don't care about the project. It's almost like jury duty. And if you don't give them graphics in the proposals, they're going to have a harder time reading all this ants on the page and all this text that you've loaded your proposal with. And you've poured your soul into figuring out, and if you have not broken it up, made it easy to read, made it user-friendly, they're not going to see half of the stuff that you mentioned. The final point that I wanted to make is why proposals lose is pricing is way off target. This is not going to be the subject of this class. However, you have to take into consideration the fact that your proposals have to be priced correctly, and right now the emphasis is on the price. I mean, cost, money, spending of the taxpayer dollars is a huge emphasis in the government right now. As you may have seen in the news just recently, the GSA head had to step down after firing two of the people who were reporting to her over spending on some conference where the government felt it was excessive. Like the part that tickled me the most is they spent $7,000 on sushi. I mean, I'm not going to even mention the mind reader, but that's not what we were talking about. In proposals, you have to make sure that you have the lowest credible cost, and on LPTA proposals, you will be the lowest price technically acceptable. So you want to make sure that you have that information. Now, we'll go ahead and get to the next slide here. I have some questions here coming from people. Will the slide deck be available? Will the audio be available? Absolutely, yes, yes, yes. They will be available after this class. As soon as we convert the audio and the video, you will get a link and you'll be able to review it later. Now, let's establish one thing. A proposal is first and foremost A, is it a document describing technical and management plan for performing a project? Well, is that first and foremost that? B, a sales document. And the answer is absolutely B. First and foremost, your proposal is a sales document. Only in this field do I have to actually tell this to people, and the proposal team will go like, really? Yes, absolutely. It is a sales document. You're selling yourself to the government, trying to win it, and that is the primary function, which is to persuade the evaluators to award this proposal to you. So, now, the art of persuasion is absolutely something that you have to pay attention to after you've made sure you're compliant. And the reason why you have to do that is that lots of proposals, and your competitors' proposals hopefully as well, will bore people to tears. The evaluators, they're going to annoy them through excessive bragging. They're going to insult them, be the tutorials and something that people already know that's really basic. But they will not get them to just be so excited to award this contract to you. And you have to understand, unless you use the persuasion, you're not going to be as effective as you would like to be. So the government is composed of different individuals, and you have to understand they have very different drivers. Also, most people, despite what some people believe they're really logical, as if they were robots, right? They're logical, that they're reasonable, but really most people are emotional buyers, especially in this culture, in American culture. Logic and credibility are there to justify the decision, and some people with stronger logic and credibility, they're just better at justifying things one way or another. In American culture especially, this is an emotional type of thing. Now, unconscious mind usually is the driver, and evaluators will respond to proposal content outside the compliance, sheer compliance. They will respond to it differently. If something looks disorganized, it may be perfectly compliant, but it has an appearance of being disorganized. They will judge it as non-compliant, and they will find faults with it, just subconsciously. They will rip it apart. And there may be subtle things that they notice, and it may be not even patently obvious of what it is. Also, you have to understand, your evaluators are people, and their prestige, security, and careers are all at stake when they're looking at your proposal. So you have to appeal to them as people, which is something that's frequently forgotten, especially as we load up a bunch of boilerplate into our proposals, really forgetting that we're writing for specific people who are going to be sitting and reading our messages. So what are you going to employ to be very effective? It's really the tools of proposal persuasion. In proposals, there are really 5 chief tools. There are more, but these are the most important ones. This is executive summary, win themes, persuasive text, graphics, and professional appearance. 5 elements. We're going to talk about all of them one by one. So proposal persuasion tool number 1 is going to be your executive summary. There are 3 types of mistakes that lead to executive summary problems. Basically, mistake type number 1 is underestimating or overestimating the importance of an executive summary. The underestimating of the importance of the executive summary really comes from the fact that a lot of RFPs don't really require it. If it's not required, why should I write it? What is it for? I've seen all this garbage out there that people write as executive summaries, trying to pass it off for executive summaries, and I have not seen why should I allocate my precious page count to an executive summary that looks like that. So a lot of people don't really truly understand how to write executive summaries well, therefore they don't see a purpose for them. And especially if it's not required, why bother? Some people overestimate the importance of executive summary. They just really kind of pay a lot of attention to them in their reviews, especially in large companies where people kind of, culturally, you do an executive summary. It's just a given. So in those companies, people will say, all right, we've got to do this, and we're going to pay a lot of attention. We're going to have like 40 drafts of an executive summary. Forget about the technical. Forget especially about the management, past performance, and resumes. We're going to focus on the executive summary. Nobody really says that, but that's what it's apparent, because when you get the review comments, every reviewer has marked up executive summary in red and it's bleeding, and there's some volunteers to rewrite them, whereas all the other sections didn't get as much scrutiny. Now, mistake number 2 is process errors. And by the way, there's someone here who asked earlier on, how can you sell the importance of an executive summary to the salesperson you are preparing the response for? So that's one of those things that are especially relevant to your question, is really convincing them. And how you sell is essentially show them how to do it well and what it's for. That's how you sell. Now, process errors. Executive summary should not be basically a job of a busy executive. In a lot of companies, executives really like to write these because they're good at them, and a lot of times people assign a wrong person to write the executive summary, especially people who are like free, they don't have other responsibilities on the proposal, and they just put that one person who is not in the proposal room, not with the proposal team, not really involved to write it, and that's not the right way to do it. Also, some people start late. For example, I have an experience where one woman was sitting literally by the beams of her car because the lights went out the night before the submission, and was trying to type up the executive summary outside to stick it into the binder. She was stuffing the binders with those executive summaries, the little pockets in front, as they were driving to deliver the proposal. And one of the things that the government listed during a losing debrief is how the executive summary is so inconsistent with the rest of the proposal. That was one of the problems that they've listed. So you don't want to start late. And you want to also, you don't want to fail to assign a specific section you don't want to assign executive summary to all the reviewers, because if you don't assign specific sections during your reviews to the reviewers, then everybody is going to start with your executive summary, and then they're going to kind of absolutely taper off towards the end. Now, mistake type number 3 with executive summaries is poor content. Poor content, essentially this is what keeps people really unexcited, is that people start talking about, well, Acme Inc. is pleased to submit this proposal. It was founded in 1989 and has successfully performed with government contracts for 20 years. We're world-class, blah-de-blah-de-blah, company philosophy. So it really amounts to blind egocentrism. So you want to avoid that. You want to talk about the customer, not you. People have unclear structure. In a lot of executive summaries, they wander different places and they make it an abstract an abstract of the paper. They're trying to summarize the whole proposal, and it's not as effective because that's your sales paper. Now, what is the purpose of executive summaries? You got to get an evaluator interested in reading your proposal. You also want to present a clear picture as to why you should win. And the rest of the proposal, it's hard to present a clear picture because you are pretty much prescribed as to what you're going to respond to in the order that they have asked you to respond. Now, a succinct picture of why you should win, that's the place where you can do it. You actually are usually not dictated the structure of an executive summary, with some exceptions, of course. And there are internal purposes. You want to focus your team, because if they have an executive summary that you've kind of drafted in advance, and the keyword is drafted, not necessarily written, because you may not finalize it till, as your proposal progresses, you want to finalize it. But your draft really is going to help focus the proposal team. And it's going to help you upward mobility, because if you write executive summaries really well, a lot of the times a big picture thinker like that, somebody who is a really good writer, you get noticed. A lot of executives are the ones who focus on executive summaries, and they will see who the writer is. Now, what I have come up with is, over the years I've studied why are executive summaries so bad. I've read a lot of bad ones over my career, and I said, all right, what makes it good? What makes your writing very persuasive? And I started paying attention to things like infomercials or commercials. How do they actually do this in that industry, especially in the middle of the night when you're sick, for example, or insomniac, and you're staying up and you're looking at the TV and you're malleable and you're weak, and all of a sudden you're watching this, I don't know, treadmill commercial, and you're going like, wow, that would be great to lose weight. I really need this treadmill. And soon enough, there's not a person sitting in front of you. There's nobody literally asking you for money, closing you, or anything else. And you're shelling out your plastic, and you're paying for this expensive product, But there's more. Well, why don't we use something like that in government contracting? Of course, we cannot take the whole formula directly and apply it, because that would annoy and absolutely have an opposite effect on the evaluators. But what can we take from that formula and apply? So I started studying it very closely, and I came up with the fact that a majority of the industry, multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry that is product sales, and especially sales that are done specifically through multimedia like TV or internet, use a technique called direct response marketing. Wow. We don't use direct response marketing in proposals, even though that's a modern technique that gets people to be persuaded and to buy. So I came up with a formula, and the formula is essentially the specific order in which you write so that you can actually persuade people, because an order of your argument is an intimate part of your persuasion techniques. So the first part is the hook, the second part is the overall win theme, the third part is introductions, the fourth part is the body, the fifth part is a roadmap, and the sixth part is the summary. If you do your executive summary in that order, you're going to be using direct response techniques. There's more to it, of course. We only have, 35 more minutes to get through it, and if I overrun this class, maybe 40, but we don't really have a lot of time to delve into it. But I'm going to talk about one of the techniques for designing a powerful hook. You have to start with the hook. You never start with yourself. You never start with, in response to this RFP number, RFP 6756, titled blah, 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 from the agency. Now you tell your customer's name. That is usually, really long, and then you put an abbreviation in and go on. We propose... You never do that. You actually want to get the customer excited. You want to get them at hello, so to speak. One of the techniques, there are 8 different techniques that I discuss in my book that I have on the subject, but one of them is to find a business reason behind the RFP and discuss it in the hook. And in order to do that, what you got to determine, you got to ask yourself kind of deeper questions about your proposal is, who are my customers' clients? Who are the people who the customer wants to please? Who pays my customer? Where do they get their funding? What services does my customer provide to other government agencies? What does my customer want to look like in front of their clients? Where is it that my customer absolutely cannot fail? What would they absolutely want to avoid so that they don't let their customers down, and what is it that my customer absolutely fears the most. And once you do that, you can literally open your executive summary with something that's going to catch their attention, that you can really respond to in your win theme, and you can get them excited. Just like in that commercial, right? When they first show you the pain, when they first hook you in by you relating perhaps to somebody shown on the screen that, oh, hey, you know, I have trouble with that too. So that's how they get you, and that's how you want to get them. So that's one of the techniques. Now, I don't have a lot of time to kind of keep spending on executive summaries. I have a whole workshop on that, but there's some resources. We have an executive summary self-study course, and there's a free article that you may want to read, which is 4 executive summary mistakes. That is in our website on our resource articles. So check out both the course and that, and we also have a full-day course that's coming up on July 20th, 2012. We only run them like twice a year, so if you really want to take that, do come up and sign up to take these classes. So now, proposal persuasion tool number 2 is win themes. Now, typical problems with win themes. You probably have run into all of them. Now, sometimes they lack outright in a proposal. A lot of the times the proposals are just plain writing without any hint of persuasion. They can be also low quality. That's what I see a lot. People have win themes. I start reading those win themes and I go like, really? All right. Can't really win there. With that, customer usually doesn't care about what the company thinks is their great advantage, like we are an incumbent. Well, you know, does the customer care that you're an incumbent, or do you care? Now, there's some win themes that are ho-hum, because win theme development skills are unnatural to most technical people. Win themes are sales and marketing messages. They're not something that most technical subject matter experts are trained to develop, and yet we lock them up in a room and get them to brainstorm on those win themes without much training, without much mindset change, without really showing them how to do things. You know, the best of our training really goes to, okay, you know, a win theme has got to have features, benefits, and proof. Come up with something now. Well, good luck, because it's not going to happen a lot of the times, or it's going to be really slow, torturous, and painful. Now, they take forever to develop, and they may be sparse. There may be too few of them. The team may give up after a couple of good ones, and they really don't ever get to, like, they get to the proposal level, they may never even get to the section level, and they may have spent hours or days to drum them up in win theme development sessions. A lot of win themes also don't pass a substitution test. That's my favorite. If you put some other company's name in your win theme instead of your own, would it still sound true? For example, we are the low-risk, best value provider. How many times have you seen that in proposals? Or, we understand the customer and have great past performance. Wonderful. Can you put somebody else's name into that and that would still sound true? Or, we are ISO and CMMI level 3 certified. So what? So are your competitors. What is the actual win theme here? Now, some win themes lack punch because someone didn't have time to verify all the facts. Like hundreds of thousands in savings. We brought this customer hundreds of thousands in savings. How many thousand? I mean, if you're specific, that's where you're going to be effective. Some win themes are self-centered and self-serving. They're about you and not the customer. I'm not going to elaborate more on that. We kind of talked about that in the executive summaries section. And some are trivialized and recycled from other proposals. This is my shout out to all the efficiency experts out there who are trying to still create libraries that absolutely are going to replace having to work really hard on proposals. Well, you know what? In services field and a custom solutions field, it's not going to be your savior. I mean, it's good to have them as an example. It's good to have them as a reference, but they're not going to be a substitute for hard work, for still figuring out what this customer needs for this proposal, for this project at this particular time. So, now, what are the win themes for? The win themes during capture serve one role and during proposals another. So during capture, they help define win strategy. They help create customer messages to position the company to win. They also help identify competitive advantages, and they help document reasons why we can win. They become a foundation of your executive summary that you draft. And of course, your capture plan, your solution development, and so on and so forth. Now, during the proposal, they will focus the proposal team on writing and focusing on what it takes to win. They're going to make the benefits of your solution plain and obvious, and sometimes it's going to be in contrast with the competition, which is called ghosting. And they're going to recur throughout the proposal and make it memorable to the customer, and they also help answer the evaluator's question, which is the most important one: why should we select you? And of course, the customer, if they can cut and paste this information as part of your award justification, then they're going to do really well. Now, here are some examples of how win themes will appear in proposals. They can stand out on their own without or with the proof, in text boxes or under headings. As you can see right there, under management approach, you're going to have them, and then right there in the focus box. Now, they also may be woven into the text, always with the proof, and you want to make sure that you put facts into it, you put past performance, or where you have done it before, why your claim is credible. That's all the proof. Now, there are other instances where you want to use them, and that's where a lot of people, even seasoned, sometimes run out of time or just forget to do this, and put them in a transmittal letter. Transmittal letter will go to the contracting officer, but you still want them to be on your side. You still want them to kind of get what your proposal is all about. Executive summary, of course, as a matter of course. Graphics and action captions. Yes, your graphics have to include your win themes, and your action captions, absolutely. Cover art. A lot of people will use the cover images that are in line with their specific win themes. So we have a question here. Now, I have a question here. How do you keep your win themes from being repetitive and cliched? Very good question. Well, whenever you focus on the customer, you actually focus on the specific needs of the customer. That's how you avoid being repetitive or cliched, because they're not really about you. They're not really about your advantages at that junction. They're about what the customer needs and you in a context of the customer. And there you just cannot possibly make it cliche, because everybody's needs are unique. Everybody is going to feel very personally about what it is that they need exactly. Here's another instance of appearance of the win themes, which is mini summary of the subsequent narrative. A lot of the times that appears in the sections or subsections where they're really long, especially in larger proposals. You may want to do that as well. And there are vignettes and pull quotes that are going to break up the monotony of text and focus the reader on what it is that you want them to remember, and that's exactly what the win themes will do. Here are some helpful resources. Again, I could talk on and on about the win themes, but I wanted to give you some of the valuable things you can take with you right away. We have a win themes development workshop. This is kind of a secret sauce of win themes development. I figured out how to cut down the process to the most important things, really arrive at the core of win themes very quickly, very efficiently, and to figure out exactly what the customer wants and what the customer needs. That class is next on July 19th of 2012. Again, only do a couple of times a year. So, and I teach them myself. Now, article that is free, proposal win themes, that is on our website, and this is a link for that. Let's get to, let me see, there's a question here. Now, we've been told not to make the cover fancy and not too many graphics, but you're saying differently. Is there a happy medium? Absolutely. Make the graphics relevant to the customer. There are very fancy graphics, especially, like 3D type of stuff. That's what the government sometimes really frowns upon in some instances. So you want to make sure that your covers are very to the point. The images, the photos that you use are customers' photos or highly relevant to the project, so that the customer really sees that you're listening and you're focused on them. I have a question from Mary. Your class is focused solely on government proposals, and the answer is they are, however, we do get a fair number of commercial proposal people coming to our classes as well, and they get tons out of it because a lot of the principles are applicable across the board. Once you get away from the compliance portion and the forms portion, majority of it is really about listening to the customer and giving them what they need, and that applies across the board to both commercial and government. So now persuasive text is proposal persuasion tool number 3. Now there are several elements of persuasion in text, and that is, if I ever get to it, one second, I'm having a minor technical difficulty. First and foremost, it is compelling content. Compelling content, it kind of speaks for itself. You have to make sure that you have brainstormed and figure out what you have to say. Then, once you have the compelling content, you have to present it in the correct structure. And I'm not talking compliance, the right outlines. I'm talking about presenting your argument so that it is convincing. There is a way to structure an argument so that you can argue it more effectively. Metaphor. Metaphor is one of those really important elements of creating what's called a mental picture. A mental picture, and a lot of marketeers know that because one of the founding fathers of modern marketing really had said this about it. A mental picture, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and a mental picture is worth 1,000 pictures. Imagine that. So metaphor, correctly used in a proposal, and we teach you how to do that in our classes, a metaphor creates a powerful mental picture that convinces the evaluator to select you without them even knowing what's going on and what you're doing. Another one is story. Story is a very important element of proposals, and it's completely underused in proposals because they're so dry. But stories is what we humans are really wired to respond to. We're wired to remember stories. We really think in imagery, in stories, and we don't really think in dry facts. All of our dry facts are kind of stored in a context of stories. Yet, in our proposals, we don't use the stories really well, and there are at least half a dozen, if not a dozen, different ways of telling an effective story in a proposal. Again, something we teach in the classes. Now, language is another element of that. How do you use language correctly without ticking the evaluators off? Because most of the time, people who believe that they're good writers, and I especially cringe when people say, "Well, I'm a really good writer." I go like, "All right, we gotta see what the writing is really, what kind of writing you're really going to produce." And sometimes, people are truly, genuinely are good writers, and a lot of the times, I look at their stuff and I go, "Oh my goodness, how do I not hurt them and hurt their feelings and get them off this section and get the section to somebody else?" So language use is really important. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. And finally, readability. Readability is making sure that your proposal reads at a certain grade level so that the person, the evaluator, can actually understand what you're trying to say. So let's talk about the language. People who, tell you they're good writers, and yet they do what kills proposals. It makes the evaluators believe you're selling to them, and there's nothing that the govies, the evaluators, hate more than being sold to. Sales is a dirty word in government contracting. Now, people lather their text with adjectives and adverbs and superlatives. They believe good writing is about just making it sound good. I don't understand what it says, but it sounds so good. So adjectives like premier, world-class, seasoned, experienced, robust, state-of-the-art, all of this stuff that is just used and used and used in proposals over and over and over again, that people are so, we almost have calluses in our eyes when we see those words. We almost skip through them or just roll our eyes because they really mean absolutely nothing. In fact, I had one of our staff proposal consultants here who was reviewing and trying to backfill somebody else's content into the new proposal. They wanted us to use the boilerplate in the places where it applied, and she, after a while, she was almost crying, and she said, "I'm staring at this whole thing and there is no substance in here at all, and there are pages and pages of writing." Have you seen that? It happens all the time. People talk about culture and, soft things that absolutely have nothing to do. Creativity. So now, we understand. Go ahead and look in your proposals and count how many times you have said "we understand" in your proposal. It's one of those things that tends to irritate people. It has just the opposite effect. You feel that you really get the customer. You really know them. You work with them day to day, shoulder to shoulder, in their environment. You understand. And all this power of emotion that you put into that word, if you don't actually say exactly what it is that you do understand, that is going to backfire on you. So try to practice taking out the word. I mean, you can write in your first draft or whatever you want. I'm a big advocate to actually allow yourself to write whatever you want in your first draft. And if you want to say "we understand," sure, do. But in your second draft, I want you to cross out or take out the word "we understand" and write exactly what it is that you want to tell them that will make them believe that you do understand. For example, here's a woman who comes, she doesn't have children, she's single, and she is talking to, she's interviewing for a job with a mother of triplets, and she says, "I understand what it's like to be a mom of multiple kids." Well, you know what? A mother of triplets may just instantly judge her and go like, "Really? Really? You must not know what you're talking about. You're single, you don't have kids." And here your woman just keeps saying, "I understand, I understand." Her credibility may be absolutely undermined and it may backfire. Now, if this woman actually turns around and says, "Yes, I am single. Yes, I don't have kids, but my parents were foster parents. I have raised multiple kids pretty much. They were working all day. I was the one who took care of everyone. I was the one who cooked for them. I was the one who made sure they were clothed. I was the one who made sure that I got them from school. They were picked up from the bus stop. Everybody's done their homework." If you actually do that and take out the word "we understand," that is where your credibility is going to go through the roof. So that's one simple example. Now, passive voice. Passive voice is when something was done. Mistakes were made. Nobody really made them. You don't have a person who actually has done the action or will do something. You don't have specific names. You don't have specific roles, yet you're saying something will be accomplished. That is not a good way to write a proposal. It does not convey passion. It does not convey your aggressive readiness to get the project done. It sounds very removed from the actual project. Impersonal language, that is when you talk about your corporation, Acme Corporation will, versus specific people who will be in charge of the project, specific belly buttons. Rounding off or approximating quantities, so that's when you failed, or somebody who is a writer on your proposal failed to look up exactly what are the savings, exactly how many resources you're going to dedicate to the project, and they just approximated approximately, I don't know, or thousands. That is not very convincing. Lacking or spotty substance, that is when you haven't brainstormed. Too much technical jargon, that's when you technical people wrote the whole thing and you cannot get through it without having to look up every single word and figure out what it is that they're talking about. And you got to understand, your evaluators may not be technical, all of them. So you have to make sure that all of them understand it. Generalization and statements that are not backed by facts and details, which is a number of, some, or many. Look up the number. Do me a favor. Philosophical ruminations. The word "very," strike it out. The word "very" is very unnecessary. And, of course, the word "we propose." It's a proposal, for goodness sakes. So you don't need to say "we propose." Just say what you will do. I have a question here. Let me look it up. Now, how do you handle your pursuit team who is trying to adopt the client's writing style in the RFP, which is difficult to read because the RFP pieces are taken from other proposals, and it makes your proposal full of grammar errors and utterly unreadable. And my answer is, do not adopt their mistakes. Actually make it readable. Do not adopt the writing style. Make your writing style very clear. In these cases, you do not want to mimic the customer, because the customer will judge you on your grammar and ability to write, and they should be able to get through your proposal without stumbling on it. So in this case, my opinion is you do not replicate their mistakes. And Carrie, yes, you will get the copy of this presentation. All right, so let's get rocking. There are some helpful resources for speed writing and clear writing and persuasive writing, and that is going to be in a course that I'm going to be teaching on April 23rd and 24th, and here are the resources, which is the Proposal, Speed Writing, and Persuasion. I actually focus on how to write fast. My personal speed is not your sort of really high professional writer speed of 3 pages a day. My speed is 12 pages a day. And I use the techniques that I actually teach in this class. And I also teach people who hate writing or don't know how to write well and how to write quickly on proposals. And those are the techniques that are very rarely taught in the proposal world, if never. This is the class that focuses on them, along with all the persuasion techniques that you can use in the text. And that class that we're not going to repeat for several months after that, probably until fall, that's going to be on April 23rd and the 24th. And another resource here is a couple of articles for you, which is Power Verbs and Improving Proposal Readability. Those are great resources, and they're absolutely free. All right, I have a question here as well. Is it good to start exec summaries with data and facts? And my answer is only if you know that the customer absolutely cares about those facts. All right. Upcoming courses in a special. I'm going to tell you very quickly before we get to the last portion of our class, because we got another couple of tools of persuasion coming up, is we have a special for those who are attending the seminar today. Only for those who actually have been signed up for this webinar is the capture manual or proposal manual. If you sign up for one of our 2-day classes that are coming up, you will get that. We normally don't give it out to the public. They are used for our university courses that we teach, and for our internal training. They're worth $300 each. If you actually sign up for one of our classes that are coming up, these and then of course the classes that are taking place in July, you will get the manual with a 2-day class, and if you register for 2 1-day classes, you'll get a manual as well. If you register for 2 2-day classes, you'll get both manuals, so you will have a lot of great references to look at. And I have another question here. All right, I will get to that question later if you don't mind. Now, the only thing that you got to remember about getting the manual is you put a note when you register for the class, or shoot us an email at service@ostglobalsolutions.com that you capture manual or proposal manual. And the deadline is 5 p.m. on April 10th, 2012, to take care of this, to actually take advantage of this special. Now, proposal persuasion tool number 4 is graphics. And let's talk very quickly about the graphics. First and foremost, you got to understand, graphics prevail over the text. I mean, it's not, no matter how loud the text is, like pre-prepare healthy, nutritious meals in our clean kitchen. Sounds very convincing. Big letters. How convincing should it be? Show an image and you will want to throw up, correct? Again, Rex is a sweet dog who is very nice to children. You would never, ever, ever let your kids play with Rex, because you will trust the image so much more than you trust the letters. It's just a fact. In proposals, for some bizarre reason, we don't use imagery, even though everywhere marketing messages scream at us with imagery. We know that using imagery is the most effective way of convincing people, of persuading them to do something, yet in our proposals we fail to do that. And we're going after, trivially, just $100 million here and there, $1 billion, 10 million. 1 million? I mean, is that small money for anyone? And yet we are failing to use what every kid knows to use in order to actually convince people, and what all modern sales and marketing employ. So proposal graphic rules, they got to be on every other page or every page of the proposal. Visuals, tables, vignettes, graphics, they got to be simple and uncluttered. They got to maintain vertical orientation. They got to stand alone. They got to be independent of text, and that is a graphic with its action caption. And speaking of action captions, they got to include action captions, because that's the first place your eye goes to when you look at a graphic. They got to be understood in less than 10 seconds. Now, your graphic may have a lot of detail on it. That perhaps may be the main place where you pack all your detail, because you may not have the page count in the proposal to talk about all the elements of your solution. You may show that in a graphic, but in those 10 seconds, the person looking at the graphic should understand how the graphic flows, what's going on, and what it's all about. And it's got to follow traditional logic. Here in the United States, in the Western culture at least, it's left to right, it's top to bottom, and it's clockwise. So all the graphics have got to flow that way. Otherwise, for the reader, if you do it the opposite way, it's got to be very hard to understand. As far as going through the graphic, actually, I have a question here. Can you explain the reason for vertical orientation in graphics from Patrick? Patrick, the reason why it's vertical is because you are having evaluators who are reading a lot of those proposals and is just cranking their necks, trying to kind of look sideways and read things. It's just harder for them. You want them to be able to read something at a glance. Once they down-selected you to just a couple of proposals, so when they're going through the final evaluation, they may be more thorough and more willing to look at stuff more carefully. But you want them to go through your proposal initially when you're making an initial cut and understand what's going on and get it and be impacted by that positively. So when you do it in sort of sideways orientation and not vertical, it's very hard. And so a good graphic artist will reorient your graphic very well. Now, the graphic, I have 3 steps to conceptualizing a graphic. You always start with a vague concept, what the graphic is. You have to start early, don't put it off, because in the back of your mind you're going to start really percolating with the idea. You know, you kind of say, okay, what is it? You want to, for example, show our process for assigning task order work to our employees. Well, start thinking about how you could portray that initially and write out your actual vague concept. Put that straight into your outline. Then what I really like you to do is to answer questions. Do not just start with art. Sometimes people find it daunting to start with art, especially as your technical and engineering staff may encounter difficulty with that. First, you got to ask, what is it that you're trying to depict? Second, what does it do? Third, what does it do better than the competition? And fourth, what does it do for the customer? Why should the customer care? If you answer all those questions, you can write an action caption. It's going to be no longer haiku. It's no longer going to feel like writing poetry or iambic verses where people feel it's so hard and they kind of have somebody who is quote-unquote good at it write all of those action captions at the very last minute when the proposal is ready for production. And they're placeholders for all the action captions. You want to start with the action caption. And you want to sketch the graphic. And the way that you sketch the graphic, you may want to use a lot of visual inspiration. Use images at Google, and also a great resource, which is Biz Graphics on Demand. It's by a very good friend, Mike Parkinson. He has literally thousands of proposal graphics there that you can look at. If you don't want to buy them for some reason, even though they're very inexpensive, modifiable graphics in PowerPoint, you may want to go ahead and just get inspiration from that and use 4 design methods to conceptualize your graphics. So now the resources you may want to use here again, we have a training course coming up. It's going to be in 2012. Actually, this date may not be correct. We had that rescheduled, so I apologize for this mistake, but keep a look, take a look at our schedule. That's going to be sometime in the fall. And we also have a free article for you, which is a Picasso method for great proposal graphics, and of course Biz Graphics on Demand. Check it out. Now, Proposal persuasion tool number 5 is professional appearance. Professional appearance has multiple elements. For example, the very first one is no grammatical or spelling errors. People will feel that you're stupid even though you may be the smartest person in the world. They will feel that you're stupid somehow, or, you know, your stuff is substandard if you do not have an editor go through your work. And self-editing is not always good. If you're the only person who writes proposals, you have to give yourself some space after you've written a draft. You have to give yourself more time to be away from the draft and then come back to it, and then you'll be a much better editor. And the more time passes, the better, at least a day. And a lot of times we don't have that kind of time. So have somebody else proof it. Have a resident grammarian pour over it a couple of times. Also, editing can be done in layers. A lot of times people don't catch all the mistakes at a first run, and you have to do it in different media. Do it in hard copy, do it electronically, read it out loud, put it up on the screen, and you will see things differently. Now, you also got to have consistency in graphics. They got to be in the same palette. They got to have the same shapes and fonts, because consistency breeds trust. And if you have things that are pulled from different proposals, in different palettes, and different ways of showing the image, or even though they're pretty graphics, they're not going to have that subtle effect of breeding trust. You got to have cover tailored to the customer. I really get irritated by all those branding experts who say, well, you know, we got to have the same brand and look to all of our proposals. It's not about you. It's about the customer, exactly what it is that they need, that's literally what the message has got to convey, that we're here to serve you. It's not about us, it's about you. Also, it's got to have well laid out proposal, you know, format. It's got to be double or single column, and as the research shows, they're equally readable if there are graphics. If there are no graphics, either one is going to have harder it's going to be harder to get through. So they're equally as readable, double or single column. It's whatever your customer prefers, whatever it is that you can actually do. So here are some helpful resources. You got to master Microsoft Office to create professionally published documents and graphics. Do not rely on Illustrator so much anymore. Unless you're a really large company, you have the software already, you have the graphic artist, and that's how you do things. Modern PowerPoint is just as powerful, and really good graphic artists can create those graphics that are much more easily modifiable, and you don't have to go through huge cycles of reviews. We have a desktop publishing course coming up in the near future, so keep an eye on that. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to answer questions for those who have been asking them. So guys, please feel free to ask the questions, and I will stay on the line for just a little bit. So now I have a question here from Henderson. If your employer is teaming and the sub is designated with putting the proposal together, and the structure and graphic layout is busy, and the formatting is not aligning properly with the text, as a reviewer, what is the best way to communicate that? Well, if I understand correctly, it's the sub who is putting the proposal together and designing the graphic, and you don't like, as a reviewer, you don't like what they're doing. Well, you know, I would first try to address it with them directly. It's just my rule. You know, if you see a problem, I go directly to the source of the problem. There may be political considerations there, so it's hard to tell not knowing more about the story, but you want to make sure that you address it with them directly, specifically. Now, one thing to take into consideration when you talk with graphic artists is they're very sensitive. You know, graphic artists, early on in my career, I was very direct, perhaps overly direct with the graphic artists, and I've really offended one too many people. I'm a graphic artist myself, not a professional one by any stretch of imagination, but I have 11 years in fine arts, and that was my major at school. So I see things that a lot of the times people don't see, and I get overly direct with people with very specific criticisms, and it's not necessarily helpful. So just be very tactful. That is just a word of advice there. And if that doesn't work, then perhaps talk to your employer and see what they're willing to do. If they're not willing to put money behind it, well, you may want to have to live with it. And if they do want to put money behind it, then you may want to offer them some help. Now, I have Ramona's question here. Are there other methods to use if graphics are specifically excluded in proposal submittal? First and foremost, define graphics. I mean, let's define graphics a little bit more broadly. Tables are graphics. If you design them very neatly, lay them out very neatly, they will actually help. Focus boxes are not technically graphics. They're just, pulling out the quote and everything else. So if they're specifically excluded in proposal submittal, just see what is excluded. I've seen, for example, flowcharts allowed, and flowcharts are great, to actually use the step-by-step process, whereas graphics are disallowed, like pictures, for example. People don't like photos there, where people just plop up a photo of something and it really does not have any meaning. For example, our team, and there's a bunch of people smiling from a picture instead of an org chart, for example. So just make sure that you are not, you're reading the language carefully and you understand what does it really mean the graphics are prohibited. Now, all right, I hear from Yulia. Thank you, wonderful presentation. Could listen to you for hours. Have to go to another call. Thank you very much, Yulia. That's very sweet. Heidi is asking, when will I have the Win Theme course again? And that is happening this summer. Go ahead and take a look at our schedule. I don't actually remember the date right this second, but it is in the summer months, June or July. Yes, I will make this presentation available to us, Shelia. I have a question here, an interesting question. How do we know that the customer really cares about the facts? Well, if they're paying you money, they theoretically should care about the facts. Now, when you ask that kind of question, I also got to ask you, what is it that you feel that they don't want to hear and why? So a lot of the times when they don't care about the facts, it means that you haven't done enough capture to educate them about something, and you're about to spring up something in the proposal for the first time on them, and that may not be the best technique. But again, I may be answering your question or I may not be answering your question. So now let's see here if we have any more questions. I would probably need to address that question via email, just trying to figure out what are all the details, because it's very hard to do it justice and be useful to the rest of the participants. All right, let's see here. I think that I've covered everything unless you have any more questions. Do you have an online course covering all these topics? In fact, we do. We have a blueprint for winning government proposals, but it kind of, a lot of concepts are applicable across the board, and that is in our self-study courses section of our website at ostglobalsolutions.com, and it covers a lot of those topics all at once. But if you want to really do in-depth, we have virtual component to our classes. We're going to stand them up, and you can participate if you're remote somewhere. All right, Dick, thank you very much for participating. It was great to have you in class. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. And if you have any more questions, you can always email me at service@ostglobalsolutions.com. And again, I see all those questions myself as well. I subscribe to that particular email address. So if you have anything, or if you need any proposal help here, we're here to help you, guide you. And if you have any career-related question as well, I'm happy to answer that. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon, and enjoy the springtime. Take